Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy the story. Remember to like and subscribe, and now the story.
This incident happened in January of this year. Last year I moved into a neighborhood with an optional HOA. At the time I'd come into enough money to buy a house outright. The only reason I moved here is because the HOA was optional, and it's a nice safe neighborhood. It's a slice of heaven compared to where I used to live. I own two vehicles, a 2004 Toyota Camry, and a 1999 Ford F-150. The Camry is my daily driver, while the F-150 is my hauler for when I need it. I bought the truck around the same time I bought the house to help with the move. And I used it to pull a rented trailer when I was moving my stuff in. The F-150 is old, but in good mechanical order. And I try to keep both of my vehicles clean with monthly trips through a car wash. The local HOA did not like me from the start due to my refusal to join. The HOA president was a retired old man who seemed like he had nothing better to do. So he tried multiple times to sell me on joining, and sent me several applications in the mail. But I always declined, politely at first. But when the president got more aggressive, I told him to shove it where the sun doesn't shine. That's when the HOA decided that I was a member anyway, and started sending me fines in the mail with that claim. I knew they were bogus, so I went to the next HOA meeting to dispute the fines. They tried to tell me that by living here, I'm in the HOA whether I liked it or not. This was an obvious power move, and something I was ready for. I could only laugh in amazement of their stupidity, and said as much to them. Then told the board that not only was I not a member, but I'd gotten a lawyer to write up a C&D for them. I handed the envelope over, the board skimmed it, then furiously told me to get out. The fines stopped for a few months, then started right back up again at random. So I popped into another HOA meeting and told them this was not legal, I'm not in their HOA, and I'd take them to court if they didn't stop. And once again I was furiously told to get out. The fines stopped for good, but the HOA president decided I needed to be made an example of. It happened only a few days later. I came home to find my F-150 gone from my driveway. I checked my cameras and saw the HOA president himself walk onto my property. He took out a pocket knife and stabbed each of my truck's tires in the sidewalls, then unscrewed the license plates off, put them in a bag and just casually walked away with them. Then a little while later a tow truck came and hauled my truck away. I called the police, and together we went to see the HOA president. But he wasn't home. With my situation explained, this was not considered a civil matter, but grand theft auto. The police traced the tow truck as being from a local junkyard, and not from an impound lot. I accompanied the police there. Not only was the HOA president present at the junkyard, but my F-150 was there being taken apart by about 4 men. They'd already removed the headlights, hood, bumper, radiator, and all of the panels off the front of the truck by the time we'd gotten there. There was stuff disconnected all over the engine bay, and the catalytic converters had already been cut out. The HOA president looked like a deer in headlights when he saw me there with police. I was nearly angry beyond words when I saw my truck in that condition. Nearly I say, because I went off like a foul-mouthed country sailor on the people who had ripped my truck apart. The HOA president was caught red-handed, but insisted he'd only towed my truck because it was in a sorry state and looked abandoned. I said he illegally took it off my private property since the HOA had no right to tow off my land, and he clearly had not been aware of my cameras, as they'd seen everything he did. He went pale at first, then furiously tried to stomp towards me looking like he was ready for a fight while yelling my truck had been an eyesore, so he got rid of it. This action earned him some new bracelets and a free ride to the station. The police were somewhat merciful to the junkyard staff, who claimed to have only been doing their jobs. The owner of the junkyard is a cousin to the HOA president. So he was contracted to do any towing for the HOA since he also owned a local impound. He had no idea I wasn't a member of the HOA, and also was not aware his cousin had ordered his employees to tear my truck apart for parts as an abandoned vehicle. The police cited all sorts of broken laws to the employees and owner, and then they agreed to put my truck back together. But I said that it had better be at least as good as it was, if not better, or I'd be going to my lawyer. The owner told his employees to do whatever it takes, or he'd separate them from their jobs. Then told me he'd bill the HOA president for everything later. Then the police and I got to watch as all of those employees had to painstakingly put my truck back together piece by piece. And they repeatedly muttered things about me to each other and flashed me the stink eye from time to time. I'm guessing the HOA president offered to bribe them all to take my truck apart as quickly as possible. But now they had to fix it for free. And they were at it for hours. They had to weld the catalytic converters back in, and even had to replace some parts entirely due to damage caused during hasty disassembly. When they first fired up the engine, it had an obvious misfire. They denied it, but police sided with me that they could tell it had a misfire too. Turns out they ruined one of the coil packs taking the truck apart, and they had to order new parts from a nearby auto parts store to fix it. One of the headlights also stopped working. Again, something that they had to fix because I stated I could prove with my home cameras that they were both working when I last drove it. And the bulbs were nearly brand new LEDs. So they had to have broken something. The coolant lines had also been just cut instead of simply disconnected. Probably because they were trying to take the truck apart in a hurry. So those were more parts that had to be ordered from the nearby store as well. I can only imagine the total cost that was billed to the HOA president for this. All 4 of the tires had to be replaced because they were not repairable. So they had to leave the truck on a lift and take all 4 wheels off. There were other problems too. And all of these junkyard mechanics had to work overtime to put the truck back together on the hopes I wouldn't sue or press charges. I wasn't even able to take the truck home till the next day evening, because the police had to get my plates back, and the junkyard staff had to take the wheels in for new tires. By the time I got the truck back, the 2 junkyard employees I saw there gave me looks that just said not to come back. And the truck actually runs better than before. So I essentially got a free sorta overhaul for my trouble. As for the HOA president, well, I did sue him for trespassing, theft, destruction of property and the illegal tow. He ended up paying his cousin for all of my truck repairs, lost his position in the HOA, and moved out of the neighborhood shortly after losing the lawsuit because he had no leg to stand on in court since everything was caught on CCTV. He pretty much surrendered to the asked for settlement, which is why it didn't get drawn out. The HOA has not bothered me at all since the truck incident. And my neighbors love me for getting rid of the old HOA president as he was a power-tripping narcissist to them all, and kept issuing pointless fines that had to be regularly disputed. Also, I have been back to that junkyard for parts. But for my Camry instead, as I went to pull a replacement grille for it, and found one in excellent shape there. They did recognize me, and gave me dirty looks. But otherwise didn't bother me. Some months ago I wrote about how the volunteer HOA in my neighborhood tried to force me to join, and then told me I was a member whether I liked it or not. I only moved here because the HOA was explicitly stated to be voluntary only. But that was just to lure people in. Once here, the HOA would try to act like you're a member and then demand you pay them. This is what they tried with me. But I confronted them in their own meetings twice about it. The first time I gave them a C and D. The second time it was an all-out threat to sue. That's when the board finally took me seriously. But the HOA president had a serious chip on his shoulder, and couldn't let it go. So he vandalized my truck and had it taken away to a junkyard. That is a whole shit show of a story you could read about in my last post. But the TLDR of it is that HOA president vandalized my truck, then ordered the junkyard staff to dismantle it as an abandoned vehicle. They were caught red-handed and had to not only put my truck back together, but put new parts in it and new tires. HOA president got sued by me and sold his house along with serving some jail time. Now that you're up to date, here's what happened after. The HOA board decided to wait till the next election to replace the president. But until then, the HOA itself were still the power-tripping fat cats they were before. Just a man short. They were leaving me alone. But the other people in the neighborhood, not so much. I was not the only one in the neighborhood not legally signed onto the so-called volunteer HOA, and the others who were being forced to pay despite lack of membership followed my example and stopped all payment, then threatened to sue. There was some blowback from the board, like them saying that having paid anything to the HOA made them members. They countered with asking where the applications they'd signed were. Of course there wasn't any. The board was losing power, and they made it obvious how much they hated it. Finally, the board elections were coming, and the board basically pleaded with the neighborhood in various ways that things don't change, aside from a new president being elected. There was strong suspicion these people were lining their own pockets with HOA money. So they were given an option of surrender. They refused and tried to keep their positions. But were all voted out. They did not leave the board willingly as they demanded an open recount of the ballots, which showed that almost nobody voted for them. So they claimed the votes had been rigged against them, and demanded a redo vote with a different system. Someone pointed out they were just stalling for time by saying the voters cheated somehow. Then someone suggested a majority vote by hand raising at the meeting. And that showed beyond a shadow of a doubt that the old fat cats were voted out. I heard they chastised everyone that they would destroy the neighborhood as they packed their stuff and left. The newly elected board and president then filed a motion to dissolve the volunteer HOA entirely. And the old fat cats were some of the only ones who voted against it. There were a few older residents who also tried to vote against it too. But the majority more than had it. The motion passed, and the volunteer HOA was shut down. There was no investigation for embezzlement. But my neighbors didn't seem to care to get one started now that the HOA was disbanded. Personally, I would have moved forward with one. But I wasn't an HOA member. Just the guy with popcorn on the sidelines. Since the disbandment around 2 months ago, at least 3 of the houses in the neighborhood have already been repainted in colors previously not approved. One of the former board members has put his house up for sale. And the fat cats have gotten a little slimmer, if you get my meaning. The house that had been rented out for the HOA office building was also sold to a new family that moved in. Just about everyone here is so much happier, except the fat cats and their very few supporters. The most power they have left is to yell at people to get off their lawns now. And they seem to spend the bulk of their time either hiding at home, or at their wine club. Yes, I found out they have a wine club. It really didn't surprise me much.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.